So this is my funding application presentation for the Storytel's framework. So interactive fiction games nowadays are either too niche, too casual, or too expensive. So what does that mean? By too niche, we're talking about your typical old school text adventure. There might be some supplementary images, but it's all about the text. And in my opinion, that's not very accessible, and you're not going to get into this unless you're already predispositioned to like this kind of stuff. On the other hand, because of the mobile industry, we completely go the different way and go to casual, and we neglect the hardcore, high-paying audience. And in my opinion, because of the casual kind of approach and demographic, the story sometimes suffers. And on the other hand, we have games that are too expensive. These are your interactive movies, and these are your AAA blockbuster games. And while they're great, they come a dime a dozen because it takes so long to make and it's so expensive to make. There are games, however, that have reached a balance. So 80 Days here, there's a unique mechanic of traveling all around the world, but at its core, it's interactive fiction. So Device 6, this is your typical text adventure, but it uses the actual platform and format of a mobile device to make it more interesting. So you see here, you're kind of walking through a corridor. So what have we learned from these kind of games that have reached a good balance? We learned that visuals are key. We learned that just because you're going to make a game accessible for everyone doesn't mean you need to simplify the story. And most importantly, finding a new way to do things guarantees success. So this is where the Storytel's framework comes in. So this is an interactive fiction game for mobile. It's for everyone. It is visually led, it's very simple to use, and it's definitely a new way to do things. So how does it work? So imagine you have a slot machine and you have 3 slots. Let's look at the first slot. Imagine you could slide up and down to show a different variant of the same image. So as you can see here, we have different variants of the cliff face. And this is our choice. This is our choose your own adventure mechanic. And determining what you select will obviously limit your options in the future. And essentially, that's how we tell a story, visually and through choice. So who am I? So I am a GDPM student. I've been writing and creating worlds since I was young. Most recently, I've been developing a fantasy world and Binar for about 4 years, and this is going to be the first story within the Storytel's framework. I also have some production experience in the mobile industry, so I have a bit of context and a bit of, knowledge on the kind of market this game is going to be catering towards. So, as mentioned before, the market is the mobile games industry. Everyone has a mobile phone, so it's the most accessible platform out there. And obviously, as you can see here, it's always growing. As for top grossing competitors, if we look to the free games here, we see that Choices is making 200k per day. And on the other hand, we look at paid games. This is Choice of Rebels Uprising, which is your typical text adventure game. And from Think Gaming, it suggests that it makes $853 per day. So why is there such a discrepancy here? It's because of the business plan that the free-to-play games have. And by choosing to emulate them, we plan to follow in their success. So what is the business plan? It's because they treat games not as a product where you just make it and then you ship it, but they treat it as a platform. This means that it has long-term support and you keep offering and creating new content for it throughout this entire long lifetime. The game will also be free to play to make it accessible to anyone. And to monetize, we plan to use the long tail method. What this is essentially we offer as much content for anyone and everyone. If you're a sci-fi fan, we don't expect you to download our romance stories, but we will have sci-fi stories for you instead. And obviously these stories are going to be episodic in nature. You're going to get the first one free and you just pay to access the next chapter. As for funding avenues, I looked at Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and apparently crowdfunding does not work at all for mobile games. But I did, however, identify Congregate Launchpad. So this is more of a long-term publishing partner option. Essentially, partnering with them allows them to take the reins on the business development and kind of monetization free-to-play sphere, and allows me to focus on development. And the criteria for working with these guys is a playable prototype. As for funding, the primary cost goes into development to support 3 developers, 1 artist, 1 programmer, 1 designer, and the rest go into stuff like tools and travel and promotion. As for the time frame, we plan to have a 6-month long development cycle from initial concept to release. A month in, we plan to have social media and marketing established. More importantly, ones like Reddit, where we want to foster a tight-knit and loyal community. And Instagram, it's a visually led game, so there's going to be lots of pretty pictures. So it's a really good platform there to gain awareness for the app. 6 months in, we plan to have Anbenar Tapestries of Fate and the first few chapters released on the Storytel's Framework app. This allows us to use it as a case study to see what works, what doesn't, before we take our next steps forward. The most important one here is the branding opportunities. For example, in the future, we could partner up with Disney and recreate their famous fairy tales in the Storytel's Framework, and that opens up a whole new demographic for future growth. Thanks for listening to the Storytel's presentation.